1970 marked a year when Hollywood executives woke up to a frightening new reality. The reliable formulas and star-driven vehicles that had kept studios profitable for decades were suddenly failing at the box office. As the counterculture movement reached its peak and American society found itself divided, the film industry desperately tried to capture the shifting zeitgeist, often with catastrophic results. This was the year that saw some of the most expensive productions in cinema history crash and burn, leaving studio accountants with nightmares and careers in ruins. What makes these failures fascinating is how completely forgotten many of them are today. Multi-million-dollar spectacles that vanished from cultural memory despite featuring some of the biggest stars and acclaimed directors. From romantic dramas that missed their moment to politically charged films that misjudged their audience, 1970 produced a remarkable collection of box office disasters that changed how Hollywood approached filmmaking. Some studios never fully recovered from these financial wounds, while others were forced to rethink their business models. What's equally intriguing is how these commercial failures reflect the profound cultural upheaval of the time. The generation gap, political unrest, sexual revolution, and technological changes all played roles in these films' downfalls. And while audiences rejected them in theaters, several have found new appreciation decades later as cultural artifacts or rediscovered masterpieces. Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating stories behind the 13 worst box office disasters of 1970, films that cost studios millions, damaged reputations, and in some cases, ended careers. From obscure titles you've likely never heard of to spectacular failures from renowned filmmakers, these are the forgotten flops that tell us more about Hollywood's turbulent era. Our journey through 1970's box office wasteland begins with one of its most forgotten casualties, A Walk in the Spring Rain. Columbia Pictures had every reason for optimism with this romantic drama. It starred the legendary Ingrid Bergman alongside Anthony Quinn, both celebrated actors with international appeal. The film was based on a well-received novel and featured picturesque Tennessee locations. What went wrong? Practically everything. The plot, featuring a middle-aged professor's wife, Bergman, who falls for a married Tennessee mountain man, Quinn, during her husband's sabbatical, felt hopelessly out of step with the cultural moment. While young Americans were protesting and questioning traditional values, Columbia delivered an old-fashioned melodrama about marital infidelity that might have worked a decade earlier. Critics were merciless. The New York Times called it a dreary, tedious, unconvincing drama of middle-aged love that should have been a beauty but was instead a bore. Audiences stayed away in droves, making the film's modest budget look like a terrible investment as it quickly disappeared from theaters. Perhaps most telling was how the film affected its stars. For Bergman, this marked her first American film in over 20 years, a disappointing homecoming. Quinn struggled with his unconvincing Southern accent, with critics noting how implausible he seemed as a Tennessee local. The film's commercial failure set a pattern and established stars and material that fundamentally misunderstood the shifting landscape, resulting in expensive productions that found no audience. If A Walk in the Spring Rain represented Hollywood's failure to connect with changing times, The Magic Garden of Stanley's Sweetheart demonstrated an equally disastrous attempt to embrace those changes. MGM, desperate to appeal to the youth market after the success of counterculture films like Easy Rider, greenlit this adaptation of Robert T. Westbrook's semi-autobiographical novel about a college student's sexual and drug-fueled adventures in late 1960s New York. The film marked the screen debut of Don Johnson, who would later find fame on Miami Vice, but at the time was an unknown 21-year-old actor. Johnson later reflected on the film's impact with brutal honesty. "It damn near buried me. It damn near sent me back to Missouri." The production was plagued with casting chaos. Andy Warhol was originally slated to make his commercial film debut, but appeared only fleetingly. Critics were unmoved by MGM's attempts to seem hip. Vincent Canby of the New York Times dismissed it as calculatingly bland, while Gene Siskel awarded it 0 stars, calling it an insult to the young people it is trying to lure. The film tanked so badly that MGM dropped Johnson immediately after its release. The spectacular failure of Stanley's Sweetheart illustrated a crucial lesson. Established studios couldn't simply appropriate the aesthetics of youth rebellion without understanding its substance. The calculated commercialism behind the film's supposedly edgy content was painfully apparent to its target audience. Stanley Kramer had built his reputation directing socially conscious films like Judgment at Nuremberg and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. In 1970, he turned his attention to campus unrest with R.P.M, an acronym for Revolutions Per Minute. On paper, this seemed like a timely project that could capture the generational tensions dividing America. Anthony Quinn starred as Professor Paco Perez, a liberal sociology teacher appointed university president after student protests forced the previous administration out. Anne Margaret played his much younger graduate student girlfriend in casting that raised eyebrows even in 1970. The film was shot at the University of the Pacific in Stockton, California, using actual students as extras. Released in the wake of the Kent State shootings, when 4 students were killed by National Guardsmen during a protest, the film should have resonated powerfully. Instead, it was criticized for its superficial understanding of student activism and clunky dialogue, courtesy of love story author Eric Sagal. Critics found it heavy-handed, while audiences largely ignored it. R.P.M. proved particularly damaging to Kramer's career, marking what many consider the beginning of his commercial decline after years of success. The director himself later admitted it was his least favorite of his films and the first to perform poorly at the box office. The film's failure demonstrated how even established filmmakers struggled to address the social upheaval transforming America. The Strawberry Statement represents one of 1970's most curious box office paradoxes. This MGM film about student protests, based on James Simon Coonan's journal of the Columbia University protests, actually won the jury prize at the prestigious Cannes Film Festival. With such critical recognition and a seemingly timely subject matter, how did it become one of the year's notable flops? The film, directed by Stuart Hagman, centered on a politically apathetic student who becomes radicalized during campus demonstrations. While its kinetic visual style and documentary-like approach to protest scenes earned critical praise, American audiences largely rejected its portrayal of student activism as either too sympathetic or not authentic enough, depending on their political leanings. More significantly, by the time The Strawberry Statement reached theaters, the market was already saturated with campus unrest films. Coming after similar titles like R.P.M. and Getting Straight, it suffered from audience fatigue with the subject. The film's commercial failure contributed to MGM's growing financial troubles, which would force dramatic restructuring in the years that followed. What makes The Strawberry Statement particularly noteworthy among 1970s box office disasters is how it demonstrates the growing disconnect between critical reception and commercial success. Despite its Cannes recognition, the film failed to translate artistic credibility into ticket sales, a problem that would increasingly plague serious filmmakers as the decade progressed. John Huston was one of Hollywood's most respected directors, having helmed classics like The Maltese Falcon and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. In 1970, his Cold War spy thriller, The Kremlin Letter, seemed positioned for success with its impressive international cast and exotic locations. Instead, it became one of the year's most overlooked commercial failures. Based on the novel by Noel Bain, the film followed American agents infiltrating Soviet intelligence with a star-studded ensemble, including B.B. Anderson, Richard Boone, and Orson Welles. Despite Huston's pedigree and the film's ambitious scope, it was released in February 1970 to critical indifference and public apathy. The movie's convoluted plot and chilly atmosphere alienated audiences seeking more straightforward entertainment. Coming at the height of the Cold War but before the 1970s spy thriller renaissance led by films like 3 Days of the Condor, The Kremlin Letter fell into an awkward middle ground, too complex for casual viewers, but lacking the action sequences that might have broadened its appeal. For Huston, this commercial disappointment came during a challenging period in his career. Though he would later rebound with films like The Man Who Would Be King, The Kremlin Letter marked a low point in his commercial viability. The film has since developed a small following among espionage film enthusiasts who appreciate its moral ambiguity, but in 1970, it represented another case of an established director failing to connect. Few of 1970's box office disasters seemed as commercially promising as The Molly Maguires. This historical drama about coal miners in 1876 Pennsylvania boasted Sean Connery and Richard Harris as its stars, with direction from Martin Ritt, who had previously found success with socially conscious films like HUD. Paramount Pictures invested approximately $11 million, an enormous sum for the time, expecting the combination of Connery's star power in his post-James Bond career and the film's exploration of labor struggles would resonate with audiences. The studio's confidence extended to filming on location in Pennsylvania coal country, constructing elaborate sets to ensure authenticity. The resulting film was visually striking and featured strong performances, but audiences largely stayed away. The dark, brutal depiction of mining conditions and labor violence proved too grim for mass appeal. Additionally, the period setting created distance that prevented viewers from connecting emotionally with the characters. For Connery, the Molly Maguires represented a painful lesson in his commercial viability outside the Bond franchise. Despite his efforts to establish himself as a serious actor, the film's failure suggested audiences weren't ready to embrace him in dramatically different roles. Paramount, meanwhile, absorbed a significant financial loss that contributed to the studio's growing troubles. The Molly Maguires has since gained appreciation for its unflinching portrayal of labor conditions, but in 1970, it joined the growing list of ambitious, expensive productions that failed to find their audience. If there was a formula for guaranteed box office success in the late 1960s, adapting a best-selling Harold Robbins novel seemed like it. His books were known for their potent mixture of sex, violence, and international intrigue, elements that had previously translated well to the screen. The Adventurers, based on Robbins' 1966 novel, appeared to have everything needed for commercial success: exotic locations, beautiful people, and scandalous plot twists. Paramount Pictures spared no expense on this sprawling tale of a South American playboy seeking revenge for his family's murders. The cast featured Joaquin Phoenix, Candice Bergen, and a host of international stars in a production that hopped across continents with lavish set pieces. Director Lewis Gilbert, who had recently helmed the James Bond film You Only Live Twice, seemed well suited to handle the globe-trotting narrative. What emerged was a bloated, nearly 3-hour spectacle that critics universally savaged. Roger Ebert called it trash, while the New York Times dismissed it as a movie of stunning superficiality. Audiences, despite being drawn to Robbins' novels, rejected the film's excessive length and disjointed storytelling. The Adventurers became emblematic of Hollywood's excess and miscalculation as the studio system struggled to adapt to changing tastes. The film's commercial failure highlighted the growing disconnect between the glossy, star-driven productions and the more personal cinema gaining popularity with younger audiences. In 1970, director Blake Edwards and his wife Julie Andrews seemed like Hollywood's golden couple. Edwards had directed hit comedies like The Pink Panther, while Andrews remained beloved following her iconic roles in Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music. Their collaboration on the WWI musical spy romance Darling Lili should have been a guaranteed success. Instead, it became one of the most expensive failures in Paramount's history. The production's budget ballooned to an estimated $25 million as Edwards insisted on elaborate period recreations, including vintage aircraft and lavish European locations. The shoot stretched over 9 months, with costly weather delays adding to the financial strain. When finally released, Darling Lili faced a public whose appetite for traditional musicals had dramatically declined. The film's old-fashioned sensibilities felt out of step with the era of Easy Rider and Midnight Cowboy. Critics were divided. Some praised the film's visual splendor, while others found it tediously overproduced. More importantly, audiences stayed away, making the film's massive budget impossible to recoup. The commercial disaster had lasting consequences for all involved. Andrews' career entered a challenging phase as her wholesome image seemed at odds with changing tastes. Edwards struggled to regain his creative freedom after the financial fallout. Most significantly, Darling Lili contributed to the financial troubles that would lead to Paramount's takeover by Gulf plus Western. When MGM hired acclaimed Italian director Michelangelo Antonioni to make an American film after his success with Blow Up, the studio hoped for another art house hit that could cross over to mainstream success. What they got instead was Zabriskie Point, a counterculture manifesto that became one of the most notorious box office disasters of 1970. The film followed two young people, a student revolutionary and a secretary, who meet in Death Valley and embark on a journey of sexual and political awakening. MGM invested $7 million, confident they had another youth-oriented hit on their hands. Antonioni recruited unknown actors Mark Frechette and Daria Halprin for the leads and secured music from Pink Floyd. Upon its release in February 1970, Zabriskie Point was eviscerated by critics. Roger Ebert called it a silly and stupid movie, while Vincent Canby deemed it a noble artistic impulse short-circuited in a foreign land. The film grossed less than $900,000 in America, representing a catastrophic loss for MGM at a time when the studio was already financially vulnerable. The failure highlighted the perils of European directors attempting to capture American cultural movements they didn't fully understand. Antonioni's abstract European sensibility clashed with American counterculture, resulting in a film that seemed simultaneously pretentious and naive. Ironically, Zabriskie Point has undergone significant critical reassessment over the decades. Many now consider it a misunderstood masterpiece. The Battle of Waterloo changed European history in 1815. In 1970, a film recreating that battle nearly changed movie history by demonstrating how spectacularly wrong a historical epic could go. Waterloo, directed by Soviet filmmaker Sergei Bondarchuk and starring Rod Steiger as Napoleon and Christopher Plummer as Wellington, represented one of the most ambitious international co-productions ever attempted. The numbers were staggering. A budget between $25 to $38 million, 15,000 Soviet soldiers as extras, 2,000 horses, and countless custom-built props and uniforms. Producer Dino De Laurentiis secured cooperation from the Soviet government, allowing for battle sequences of unprecedented scale without special effects. On paper, it should have been a triumph of spectacle. When released, critics acknowledged the impressive battle scenes but found the film dramatically inert. Rod Steiger's performance as Napoleon, described by Roger Ebert as bleary-eyed, failed to bring humanity to the historical figure. More fatally, audiences simply didn't show up. The film became one of the costliest box office failures of its era. The commercial disaster of Waterloo had far-reaching consequences. Most significantly, it helped kill Stanley Kubrick's planned Napoleon biopic, as studios became wary of investing in Napoleonic subjects. It also demonstrated the limitations of spectacle without compelling characters, a lesson Hollywood would repeatedly forget and relearn. Today, Waterloo maintains a cult following among historical film enthusiasts. Few films in cinema history have crashed as spectacularly as 20th Century Fox's adaptation of Gore Vidal's controversial novel Myra Breckinridge. Released in June 1970 with an X rating, this satire about a transgender woman seeking to destroy traditional masculinity became infamous for its production problems, critical drubbing, and commercial failure. The film starred Raquel Welch in the title role, with Rex Reed playing her pre-transition identity, Myron. Mae West came out of a 27-year retirement to play a supporting role, creating a volatile set where she and Welch reportedly refused to speak to each other. Director Michael Sarn alienated cast and crew with his erratic behavior, sometimes leaving everyone waiting while he thought for hours. Critics were merciless. Time magazine declared, "Myra Breckinridge is about as funny as a child molester." The film cost $5.38 million, but earned only around $3 million, representing a significant loss for Fox at a time when the studio was already struggling financially. Beyond its commercial failure, Myra Breckinridge became notorious for its legal problems. The White House demanded removal of footage featuring Shirley Temple, then a U.S. ambassador, and actress Loretta Young successfully sued to have her image removed. Gore Vidal disowned the adaptation, calling it one of the worst films he'd ever seen. Myra Breckinridge has since gained cult status for its sheer awfulness and camp sensibility. After the phenomenal success of The Graduate, director Mike Nichols seemed untouchable. His adaptation of Joseph Heller's beloved anti-war novel, Catch-22, appeared destined for both critical and commercial success, with a screenplay by Buck Henry and a cast including Alan Arkin, Orson Welles, and Art Garfunkel. Paramount Pictures invested $18 million in the production, a massive sum for 1970, as Nichols recreated World War II bomber sequences and built elaborate sets in Mexico. The director's meticulous approach extended the shooting schedule and inflated costs, but the studio remained confident in his vision for this darkly comic exploration of military absurdity. Upon release in June 1970, Catch-22 earned mixed reviews. While some critics praised its ambitious scope, others found it failed to capture the novel's unique tone. More damagingly, the film had the misfortune of arriving shortly after Robert Altman's MASH, another war comedy that connected more immediately with audiences. Financially, Catch-22 earned $24.9 million against its $18 million budget. Technically not a loss, but far below expectations considering marketing costs and profit-sharing agreements. For Nichols, it marked his first commercial disappointment, after an unbroken string of successes. The failure of Catch-22 demonstrated how even the most promising literary adaptations could falter when attempting to translate complex narrative structures to the screen. It also showed how quickly audience tastes were evolving. Nichols' carefully constructed satire seemed too polished for viewers drawn to raw aesthetics. Our final entry represents perhaps the most ambitious of 1970s box office disappointments. Tora. 20th Century Fox's meticulous recreation of the Pearl Harbor attack was conceived as the definitive cinematic account of this pivotal historical event. With a massive $25 million budget, the film employed separate American and Japanese units to tell both sides of the story with unprecedented accuracy. The production faced immediate challenges when acclaimed director Akira Kurosawa, originally hired to direct the Japanese sequences, departed the project. Despite the setback, Fox pressed forward with substitute directors and an obsessive attention to historical detail, including authentic aircraft and recreated military installations. When released in September 1970, the film received mixed reviews. Many critics, including Roger Ebert, found it technically impressive but dramatically inert, describing it as one of the deadest, dullest blockbusters ever made. American audiences largely stayed away, though the film performed better in Japan, where audiences appreciated its balanced portrayal. Though Tora eventually grossed $29.5 million domestically, ranking 9th for the year, this wasn't enough to recoup its enormous budget when accounting for marketing costs and theater percentages. For Fox, coming after other expensive disappointments like Myra Breckinridge, the film's underperformance contributed to serious financial difficulties. Ironically, Tora has gained significant respect over time for its historical accuracy and impressive practical effects. Modern viewers often prefer its documentary-like approach to later Pearl Harbor films. The box office disasters of 1970 collectively tell a story of an industry in painful transition. The old studio system was collapsing under its own excesses, while filmmakers struggled to connect with evolving audience tastes. The financial damage was substantial. MGM and 20th Century Fox were particularly hard hit, leading to major corporate restructuring that fundamentally changed how films were produced. What's fascinating about these commercial failures is how many have found second lives decades later. Zabriskie Point, Catch-22, and Tora are now appreciated by many critics for qualities that 1970s audiences overlooked. Others, like Myra Breckinridge, have developed cult followings precisely because of their spectacular missteps. For modern viewers, these forgotten flops provide a unique window into a pivotal moment in American culture, when traditional values were being challenged, political unrest dominated headlines, and Hollywood was desperately trying to remain relevant. Perhaps most importantly, these films remind us that commercial failure doesn't equal artistic failure. Many of the 1970s box office disasters were ambitious, risk-taking productions whose influence continues in cinema today.